Grand rising, dear friends and family. Welcome to another episode of the Sacred Sons podcast. My name is Adam Jackson, and today I am honored to be bringing in author, activist, artist, and musician, Stephen Jenkinson. Stephen is coming back to the Sacred Sons podcast for the second time. This time he's armed with a new book co-authored by Kimberly Johnson called Reckoning. You know, we're still in it. This is a time of deep reflection and of specific action. And so I want to acknowledge Stephen for the work that he's putting out to the collective, calling in radical honesty, calling it like it is. And that perspective is needed now. We have so much sugarcoating. And just to be frank, there's so many lies out there about the human condition, the human experience, and what Stephen is calling the moral ecology of our times. So we're going to get into that today. And with that, our guest today, he's an activist, an author, an artist and musician. Along with his wife, Natalie Roy, he is the co-founder of the Orphan Wisdom School. Right now, he is embarking on a tour with his band, Nights of Grief and Mystery, to the UK, Canada, and United States. Please welcome Stephen Jenkinson.
You know, this is not like a generic, we're not in a generic anything. This is a rough time. And yes. And rougher is awaiting your kids, rougher than this. I'm absolutely certain of it. So if you're born to a troubled time, as you and I both are, you know, we got to decide again, and probably again, what that asks of us. And ultimately, you decide, I would say by default, more often than not. And you're born to a troubled time. You can imagine it was easier, better, some other era. And somehow you deserve that, but you got this. And it's a kind of sucker's situation that you find yourself in, and you just, you could be better, but it isn't. So that's an affliction. Or you decide it's distinctly possible that the troubles of your time not only deserved, but required the likes of you, and that's why you're here. Now you best get busy translating that into some kind of direct action that's world friendly, you see. That's the urgency that I find claims me. And, I worked enough in the death trade that I know what it looks like not to be able to do it anymore. Yeah. And so, as the great No Doubt song says, what you waiting for?
You're listening to No Doubt over there? You Gwen Stefani fan?
Got to get around. I got to get around.
So I perused The Reckoning. I haven't fully read the book, but in there you mentioned that your mother, were she still alive, would not recognize not only the situations we're in, but what we hold dear and how we hold it.
Right.
I thought this was such a profound statement, and I want to flip it back to you, which is, what do you hold dear?
Well, including what I just said. So I certainly hold that dear. Yeah. I hold dear a certain moment that for whatever reason your question has brought forward, which is, so I'm 3.5 years old and I'm in the hospital and I'm dying of spinal meningitis. And in those days, kids died of spinal meningitis pretty routinely. And I was one of them. And it was clear that the hospital staff, I can still remember the change in the nature of their touch when in some kind of team meeting, they kind of caved into the obvious that I wasn't one of the ones they were going to save, Yeah. So they're trying to save themselves from the imminent death of a child on their watch, which I completely understand, having been there now myself. And then my mother comes to visit, and, this is going to sound bestial to you, perhaps, given your age, but there was a time where visiting hours were heavily policed in these circumstances. And regardless of the condition of the patient, the loved ones were were shown the door at 4 o'clock or whatever it was. And guess whose job that was? Like the nurses didn't have enough to do, but they did that too. So I can still remember the nurse showing my mother the door, her stopping outside the door, and it's closed. And in those days, they had that kind of safety glass with the wire mesh in it, in the door of the room. And she stopped and she turned around and she looked at me through the glass. And so I'm on the receiving end of a particular kind of look. It's the kind of look that we reserve for the distinct possibility that we're looking at somebody that we won't be able to see again. Literally.
Yeah.
To be looked at that way is like being in a wild place, to be honest. It's forlorn, but it's a lot of things. It's a kind of mystery that you wouldn't know how to seek out. You wouldn't even know to think of it.
Yeah.
But you can see yourself gone through the gaze of your deeply grieving parent. That shit will, if you're lucky, that will never eclipse in you. You can see yourself gone. And either you become a Buddhist or you get to work. I'm not saying Buddhists don't work, don't get me wrong. But anyway, I didn't become a Buddhist.
You get to work. Yeah,
you get to work. You get to work, yeah. Because that's RuPaul, right?
Working, girl. Yeah,
you got to work. That's what it says.
Work. You better work. Yeah, and that goes into another question I had about you, which is what is the source of the depth of your grief? And I just felt it. I just felt that connection, and that connection is authentic to you really from the time you were born.
Yeah, I come by it honestly now. It's not an affectation, right?
Right.
And I don't require the theatrics, and I don't even require a moment in the present moment to somehow connect me with that stuff or get me there. I don't need a sad moment, I mean, you could say, well, look what you ended up doing for a living. Yeah, but 3/4 of that stuff was not sad moments. 3/4 of it was unnecessary crazy shit. That's a different order completely. Yeah. And that's where the work came from. It didn't come from the sadness or the kind of mutually recognizable sorrows that humans can engage in when they just look across the chasm and at another person and say, oh, you too. Yeah.
Right.
But the work, the work doesn't come from there. The work comes from that you were visited by certain consequential things, and they either disfigured you horribly or they configured you. In my case, I got more of the second one. Yeah. And then I never wondered about the assignment, if you will. I mean, I still had to translate, you understand, but I mean, from as a child, I suppose, and all the way through, there was a incorrigible, in the literal sense of the term, couldn't be corrected, incorrigible understanding that certain things were apparent, that as I lived my life, I began to realize they weren't democratically distributed. This stuff is not true for everybody. It's not equally available for everybody. People got other things. And so maybe you're in the world, so this can be in the world. You see, and you need a certain amount, can we be frank? You need a certain amount of vainglory sensibility to occupy the position, right? Because nobody's asking you to do it. And so you can run the risk of being way too much of a Leo, or however you want to understand the affliction. But ultimately, you have to be willing to ask for forgiveness more than you're willing to ask for permission in these kind of matters. Yeah.
In that asking for forgiveness, do you have a sense that you chose to come in this way? Do you believe in this kind of, we have a soul, and the soul's coming into a body for a purpose, for a specific purpose, for a greater purpose potentially, but in the same way, like what did you say here? You said you're not the solutions guy. You leave that for the heroes and for the guys that come in with that predisposition. Right. Do you feel like your predisposition, do you see it as a gift in a way?
Well, I see it as a burden I was entrusted with. You know, so I mean, let's not put too many bows on it, you know.
Sure.
It's a singularly rough ride. Well, okay, I'm going to tell a story that in this context I've never told. And it's not that self-revealing, but it is personal. So for what it's worth, it's precious to me. But I'm happy to tell you because we're going good here. So, and this is what it is. So I just call them they. It's not very elaborate cosmology, right? But that's what they go by for me. Right. They. So wherever this stuff comes from, wherever your best stuff come from, just call it they. You could do worse, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I asked them for a meeting one day. This is maybe, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago, or maybe a little more. And I asked for a meeting. Now, don't forget, through the course of me telling the story, who they actually are and what they're likely to know by virtue of who they are, right? They certainly know more than me.
Yes.
So it's rather presumptuous for me to tell them anything because, you know, you'd figure they've already got they got a lock on this stuff. No, of course they do. But anyway, I said, could we have a meeting? Of course. When would you like to have it? We're having it. Oh, right. Okay. So here's the agenda from my point of view. Now, I've been doing my best, not with a great degree of success, to carry the ball that you entrusted with me somewhere along the line there. They say, yes, indeed, they said. So there was no opposition whatsoever. Great, I said. And you've probably noticed that it hasn't gone so swimmingly more often than not. Well, of course they've noticed, you know, but anyway, you have to say these things, right?
Yeah.
So, and so I'm just wondering, I mean, the background story is, does it have to be so friggin' hard? You know, does it have to be so much opposition and so much heartbreak and so much misunderstanding? But I didn't want to whine. So I said that thing, what I said to you a second ago. And they said, well, we're actually surprised it took you this long to bring it up. But yes, we're more than aware of the slings and arrows of your personal outrageous fortune. So what about it? And I said, well, I'm just thinking, is it possible for me to do the same job, but in a place that's slightly more inclined to entertain the possibilities? That's what I'm wondering. It's just I'm just petitioning for relocation. What do you think? And they said, of course. And I couldn't believe it. It's that easy. Is it like ask and it shall be done unto you? Is that it? They said, that's it. But there's a PS. I knew it. I said, I knew there was more. Yeah, there's more. It's like this. What do you suppose you'd be doing in the place that's more amenable to this work? Well, I said, the same work. They said, no. You see, by virtue of it being more amenable, that work's already been done in that place, you see. A place has no need of you or of us, not now, and certainly not this. So you'd be bargaining for unemployment or disemployment by virtue of going for the slightly easier ride. But if you still want to go, you're gone. Oh, I was defeated instantly and persuasively and permanently. And so here I find myself in the very unpromising Anglo-North American wild places. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as Leonard Cohen said, God bless him, he said, I was born like this. I had no choice. I don't think actually I was born like this, but certain things swirl around you, you know, and you're on the receiving end of a kind of you still have to translate it, but you're on the receiving end of a kind of moral, ethical dilemma, which is that you're credited with the capacity to see otherwise, but you don't get to see the otherwise very often. And that gap starts to open up inside you personally until you translate that into something must be done, something must be done. And so then you try to figure out what that is, and whether it's, writing things down or recording things or going on the road with a band or whatever form it takes. You're just trying to translate, the things that were entrusted to you. You're not saying you got it all figured out, but I learned this. I did learn this. I was lucky enough to be apprenticed to an old black man in New England when I allegedly was supposed to go to Harvard, but I actually toured around with him. I was a really nominal musician at the time, but he thought I was good enough. So I was his band, and he was a storyteller. And this mother was the genuine and real dilemma. He was so adamantly capable of being himself that he was scary. Okay. And one of his ways of characterizing him, listen to this for a second.
Yeah.
He said about himself more than once, he said, well, I don't look like much, which wasn't true at all. Ask the ladies. That wasn't true at all. But he would say, I don't look like much, but I am hard to kill. That's a dangerous man. And he was a dangerous man that had butterflies painted on his face whenever he performed. Butterflies on the palms of his hands, just making the case for a better day, asking America to be beautiful, that kind of thing. That's the guy. And so here I am slouching on adolescence doorstep, in my early 20s. And I've never seen the real thing, right? So, of course, I got an out clause called I've never seen the real thing. And then this guy comes along and he's a thief. And he steals from me all my callowness, all my youthful self-indulgence. It's all gone in a heartbeat. And I'm radiated by the genuine, adamant human thing. And what's gone from me forever is the ability to live as if I've never seen it.
Yeah.
See? And that's what the best teachers will do to you. They'll steal your shit from you until all you've got left for a while is theirs. And now you got to make your way, and they're not with you anymore. And you got to be a grown-up somehow. And you're going to have your 10 years in the wilderness, right? And you got to have, you've been entrusted with something, and you got to keep it alive. And you don't know how to do it. And you sound like somebody from the 12th century, and maybe you do sound like, maybe you are from the 12th century. I don't know anything about that stuff, but you're kind of a stranger in a strange land. You look around to the people to whom you were born, and you say, how did this happen? How did I get like this? How do I not quite belong? And why is my belonging taking the form of a sense of that we're not holding our own here? That the younger generation are about to taste the bitter wine, that we hastily distilled, kind of thing. So that was the nature of my affliction and my deliverance, all in the same character. You could do worse.
What did that experience inform you on in regards to mentorship? I feel like mentorship is something that is missing from our culture. The lack of mentorship, especially for young men who need it. It's vital to have that real reflection, the rawness. Someone to just look at you and say, hey man, look at yourself in the mirror. Look at what you're doing. So some of that real cold reflection is really crucial. And so what did that experience inform you of on mentorship? And what are your thoughts on how we mentor this generation that has so many slings and arrows pointed at them?
Yeah. Well, this might not be a very satisfying answer, because I tend not to use the language of mentorship, this sort of thing. But I'm thinking about elderhood and apprenticeship at the moment, which are approximations maybe of what you're talking about or asking me. And it seems to me that neither one of those things includes episodes of self-improvement, right? So the first thing I go to limb and say that if we want to use the language mentorship, that the mentor's principal responsibility is not to compliment the mentee.
Right.
Not to uncritically positive regard them. That's what parents are for. And parents are absolutely vital in the proceedings in the janitorial function. Really, which is, what do you mean janitorial? I mean, if you're talking about the psychic and spiritual and poetical life of a young person, then parents got too much skin in the game in terms of the outcome because it reflects so mightily upon them. Naturally, it does, right? Okay, but the waywardness of a young person does not reflect poorly upon the elder at all. Okay, here's a story. I'm going to go slightly afield and then see if I can come back.
Okay.
So this happened in Duncan, British Columbia, some years ago. And I was in a circumstance where there's 4 or 5 native people and me with a rental car. Now, if those things collide in real time, you're going to be driving these native people somewhere pretty soon. That's just what it means. That's just how it goes. And that's what happened. And where did they want to go? They wanted to go to the new friggin' Walmart that had just opened up on the edge of town. Now, I got a vested interest. I got a personal ethical dilemma called I can't go into Walmart. And I've never been in one. So what do I don't even know what I'm talking about. But I know that I'm never going to go into one just because it's wrong. Okay?
Yeah.
The shit's just wrong. So anyway, I'm driving to the Walmart and I'm thinking to myself, I'm bitterly disappointed in these people, right? They should know better, God damn it. You know, and here I am aiding and abetting this shit, and they're just going to buy all this cheap shit from China, and the whole thing's wrong and it's transgressive. And man, the thing was probably built over the graves of their ancestors. And what are they doing? But I'm not saying a word. I'm just quietly driving them because I don't know what to do with all this, you see? All right. So we pull up in front of Walmart and I'm like the chauffeur. And they'll look at me like, you coming? Hell no, I'm not going in there. And they just look at each other like, whatever. And so they fall over each other like kids at the beach. They can't wait to get in there. I'm just disgusted. So I pull into the parking lot and I'm just sitting there full of being right? Full of it. And then somehow, wherever it comes from, whether it's they or some part in you that's not completely collapsed by your own certainties, whatever it is, that part of me comes in and says, it's very interesting. Always understated, right? It's very interesting. I said, what's so interesting about it? Well, you're so upset and they're not upset at all. Yeah, well, it's because they don't get it. Is it really? Is that why? Well, it looks like that. No, it looks like that to you. Do you know why? Because you're embarrassed by Walmart. No, it's worse. You're humiliated by the presence of Walmart. And you know why? Because it comes from your shit. That's why. And it doesn't matter that you go or you don't go, or you'll never buy anything from there. It doesn't change anything at all. You look there and you think generic white culture. And it's just fucking irredeemable, basically. And that's what you're on about, mister. And here's the thing. Those native people, they look at Walmart and say, let's see what kind of wild shit the white people are up to lately. And they go in. And it means something completely different to them. So, you know, free your mind and the rest might follow, so to speak, right? Yeah. And it was an enormous life lesson that all happened in the privacy of my own mind, you know. And I didn't say anything when they came out either. I didn't thank them for the learning experience or nothing. So this is my way of saying, I think that's what being mentored comes to, is that you have unwelcome bouts of seeing yourself in action as a consequence of the willingness of the person across from you, the older and wiser person, to lean in, but not in a corrective way. Right. More, as you said, in a reflective way, where it becomes almost lethal, like you can't deke yourself when they're looking at you like that. For example, let's imagine you hurt the feelings of an older person and they lean in and they're not punishing you for the fact that they're hurt by something you said or did, but their hurt is manifest. And that's all it is. And now you're contending with the hurt that you perpetrated unawares because you were just lost in yourself, whatever it is. And man, if I can't think of a more precious presence that we could have with each other, then the hurt could be manifest minus the punishment. So now you're just there with what you did, not with how somebody feels about you.
Right.
And so it gives you a chance to, you can begin to enter into something redemptive now.
Yeah.
But it begins with how deeply unbecoming of what you were entrusted with as a person you were for that moment.
It sounds like there's some compassion in there.
Tremendous. You know, the compassion of a proper teacher, if you will, is that they're not pointing anywhere else but here and now. Oh, you can, of course, you could talk about the past, and you know, it's not that it's not, quote, allowed. It's just that all the chips are down now, right? So you know, as I said earlier, not a lot to wait for. And I learned that when I was in the death trade. That's where it came to me, you know, for the obvious of reasons, right? People are dying. You make an appointment, you're going to see them Monday at 3. Monday at 3 never comes. That happens about 3 times, and you stop making appointments for Monday at 3. I mean, you still do them. But what I'm saying is, when you're making that appointment Thursday for Monday at 3, you're not saving anything for Monday. You're spilling everything you got on the floor right now, hopefully not overwhelming somebody. Yeah. But that sense of urgency has claimed you mercilessly, and it's not going away, kind of thing. So I agree with you. There's immense amount of compassion in the older person not being so caught up in their own personal homelessness or you know, intractable sorrows or feelings of being overlooked by younger people. Even that's a big one, right? That you're not mobilized by that, you're tenderized by it. You understand that most of the neglect that you're on the receiving end of is passing through the younger person, not to them. It's through them. It's coming from elsewhere, and they're swept by it. They're swept to the curb by it almost as much as you are.
Wow. But
their particular, the hostility the culture has for them takes the form of selling them and sexualizing them, right? Which it doesn't do to somebody of my age, needless to say.
Yeah. You talk about that in The Reckoning, and it is a disastrous time to be born into as a young person.
Yeah.
By my estimation.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about the moral ecology of our times.
Mm-hmm.
Could you like expand a little bit more on that? You know, not only the sexualization of children and what they have the ability to engage in through technology and all these means, but there is a sense of a lack of a moral compass here, right here, right now.
Yeah.
So how do we engage in this ecology that we have been born into?
I'm going to go to a limb here and do something that might seem unbecoming. I'm going to read something to you. You could tell by
I saw you put the glasses on.
The hardware, exactly. And it's even more unbecoming still because, it's that damn thing right there.
There it is. Let's go.
Okay, but apparently today's the official release date. So so it's born now and it's dry. I know that for a fact. So let me see if I can come up with something that's worthy of your question.
Mm-hmm.
All right. During the time, this is me, I've written a letter to my co-author of the book. So she doesn't know this. She's written one to me. They appear at the end, but it wasn't a conversation. The conversations were ended. So we're mindful of each other without saying so to each other until this moment. So I say, I've grown weary of the lacerating, contentious me speak of the podcast world. weary of listening, weary of the inquisitions made out as inquiries, weary of the small part that maybe I've played in it all. It's nothing to be proud of, but I learned finally what enough means. And so I acquiesced to the vertigo and I planned for some withdrawal, and it's nothing dramatic. With the plague taking its toll on the quantum give a shit of the crowd and the staggering to stillness of the Orphan Wisdom School and the ebbing number of requests for interviews, there's not a whole lot to forsake. And it's the first time that going still seems advisable. And then there's this intrusion right here, a little etymological moment in the book. And it says this, blessing in italics, blessing, from the old Anglo-Saxon word for blood, as in blessing is the spilling of blood. You know, the concentrated blessings of winter in the north of the world are coming on as I take my uneasy rest here at the day's end by the stove. There are the particular blessings of contraction at this time of year, and there's involuntary contrition for the inattentions to more amenable weather when it was on us. These are the kind of ruthless and incontestable deals with an unblinking God, undismayed by the errancy of his charges, and it visits in them equally upon the godly and the ungodly, and it's scary stuff. And the rough gods have swung low, and they're on Main Street now. And it's a perfect time to go to the ground and live with less and burrow in and bed down, or so it seems. And then there's the domain of the weather, and here we are all its citizens. And I can agree to the penetrating cold or not, but the cold doesn't notice. And you're in California, so you're going to have to take it from me. And I'm at it here again, anyway, one more time with feeling just before the lights go down. But this time, though, somebody's on the other side of me tangling with these dark days. And there's you, and there's your child. And there's the oh my godness of it all piling up by the side of the road. And you're an ordinary citizen, you're a civilian in a weaponized time. And so am I. So what do we do? And what do we tell the kids? And what will we mean to them in the year 2030? So that's how I established the ground rules, if you will, right, for the engagement here.
Yeah.
And the very next line is, I'm going to take a stab at describing the moral ecology of the times. And without replaying the whole thing, because it's a rough, I mean, I just didn't take it easy. I mean, it's nothing to be proud of, but I hadn't up until now in writing been fairly direct about the great unlikelihood of things getting better and some sense of why. And I'm corroborating not only young people's take on things, but certainly that by saying that the fundament is no longer seemingly worthy of your basic trust or your capacity to give a shit. The basic moral, ethical, political, and religious fundament somehow has been so betrayed that it now betrays. And then if you don't start there, you're not starting in this time, it seems to me. You're faking it. You're engaging in the great grief bypass that says that if we just do this and that and learn how to squat just properly, you know, and inhalation and exhalation, that everything's going to magically roll out, you know. But we've been doing that for 40 or 50 mother jumping years. And
it ain't working.
It's far from not working. It's worse than not working. It's pretending to work. And people like me, at my age, I should say, just tired, you know, just want a little time in the sun, just want some recognition for time in.
Yeah.
But it's not coming. It's not coming. So there's a moment in the Grief and Mystery show that we're about to take on the road. I think it's the end of next week. We're going to the UK. First time in 3.5 years. Yes, to answer your question, I'm scared silly. Yes, I am.
Is that right? You get
And
nervous
there's
to
a piece
perform?
called, oh yeah, completely. Because I'm not a natural born, stage person at all. What I am is a shy person who fails to practice his shyness from time to time.
Yeah.
That's what I really am. I'm congenitally in the wool. I'm shy, but I'm like desperately shy. So this is unnatural, but apparently for the moment called for. And that's the piece I try to make with it,
Yeah, that's interesting. I have all these words written down about you: activist, author, artist, musician. How do you see yourself in all of it?
I don't really. I'm not looking for myself in it. Okay. You get to a point, not magically, not inevitably, but you get to a point where you're done looking for yourself.
Yeah.
Not that there's not more work to do and you could be a better person, and all that's true. And hopefully that might be the consequence of taking up the work. But the work doesn't have me in the center of it. Yeah. Self-recognition in the center, it's a happenstantial byproduct that kicks in from time to time. And sometimes it's actually mildly approving and affirming. Sometimes it is. Like I'll get the occasional affirmation from the ozone, in the form of, I had no idea you existed, and this came across my transom at exactly the right time, and I just want you to, that sort of thing. And yeah, and you're thrilled because the universe mysteriously is unfolding, and it includes you temporarily, and you're lucky, and then you're doubly lucky that they let you know. Yeah. And then for the moment, it contends well with the ugly things that come in that accuse you of just bestial self-interest and all the rest. Yeah. And I don't intend to grow any thicker skin than I got already, see, because it cramps my style. I mean, moving on the stage doesn't come that readily to me anyway. No sense armoring up, you got to stay limber, right? So that's the cost. But I'm lucky somehow that the things, I think I'm fairly sure I was read to in utero. I certainly know I was read to as a very young peanut, just barely here. And there's something about it, something about the cadence of the human voice, something about it carrying a certain consequence and a nuance that was underneath or between the words, which of course I don't recall, but I recall being addressed that way. Yeah. And it's never left me, to the point where that's my epistemology. That's how I see explicitly. That's how I hear. I hear in a kind of cadenced sequence. Yeah. So occasionally I recognize myself being able to do so when I'm engaged in some work that may be of nominal benefit to a fellow human being. And that's the collateral payday that can be available. Yeah. But it's fitful, because most of the lion's share of work of this kind is not, the general populace is not clamoring for it. No. So it is a tough sell, man. And imagine going on the road. That's the case. Yeah. You go on the road with a rap of a kind that carries the nuance of what you and I have been talking about here. And people pay their hard-earned silver, right, to get in. And they have no idea what they're expecting, but somebody pressured them to come. And it's not the most promising situation, right? And then dude stands up at the front there, and he's not saying, yeah, Baltimore, or, nothing of the kind, right? He's not presuming that everybody's in the house. Right. He's still got to work to get you there. And then you realize, man, you in a sweatshop. That's what it is. It's not a concert. It's a spiritual and mythopoetic sweatshop. That's where we are. And it's time to work. And 2.5 hours later, hopefully you did the best you could and you didn't leave much undone.
At the end of that 2.5 hours, do you take any pleasure? Do you have the existential experience of music? You know, for me, music is the only evidence of God that I've found. That moment, the moments of listening to music, regardless of the style or the brand or the fashion, it's like it hits us, it speaks to us, it untethers our soul for just a moment. Do you experience this through music yourself?
You know, when you're in the inside of the great music maker, you're surrounded by a band. They're listening ever so carefully to what you're doing. They're contributing all their study, all of their woodshedding, all their, you know what I'm saying, all the really bad piano lessons, all of that stuff is coming to bear in this particular moment because people are sitting, 8-10 feet away from you. And when that all works, I don't know that there's anything that comes close to that, really.
Truly.
It's the sense of being well employed is so welcome in a moment like that. And that you get a chance to do your part, that's all it is. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean, I'm not talking about standing ovation. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. People ovate for all kinds of strange reasons, right? Not all of them have to do with you. And it's not as an indication that you hit the mark, right? So maybe there's something else. Maybe there's another measure that you kept up your end, and you have to have some degree, not of self-assurance, but you can't be a stranger to what you're doing so that you're relying on the response of the audience to tell you.
Right.
They're playing their part, but definitely what we're up to in the Nights of Grief and Mystery is to disassemble the rudiments of theater. Definitely that's one thing we're up to, because we're trying to reacquire the ceremonial underpinnings that theater once was. And we lost it when we introduced two things that didn't belong in ceremony. One of them was script and the other was audience. Because in a ceremony and in a blessing, you can't have an audience, man. You can't have people watching, adjudicating, voting on whether they approve or not. Because
a part of it, they have to be integrated into the ceremony.
Yeah, because many a thing hangs in the balance, you see. That's what it means. So we try to do away with audience and melt that fourth wall and engage them as co-conspirators and potential and much needed allies in a particularly troubled time. That's the way we come to them. So it's supplication. It's not, let's have a good time. It's supplication. And if you hit the mark right, you're having a good time, given everything, you could say. And no script. I mean, we got a set list, which is an allegation. You still don't know how it's going to go. And you don't know what your memory's like. And I'm not off the book yet, right? So I still got my lines to remember for the next 10 days. I got to get my lines straight, man.
Nice. Well, I imagine by December, we're going to have you come through San Diego for a show with the Nights of Grief and Mystery. We're working on that right now.
Oh, I'll have my shit wired by then.
I imagine you'll be tight by then.
Oh, yeah. I better.
Yeah, I played in a band. I played in a heavy metal band.
Oh, yeah.
Or hardcore band for about 10 years. I toured the world, screaming, singing on stages,
right.
head banging.
Yeah.
And all the things. And, even to this day, the life of a touring musician, it's tough to beat. It's a good life.
Yeah.
And it's not without its challenges.
Yeah.
But there is something about the roaming, the going from city to city, bringing your art, having the culture of that town come to you to experience your gifts. and then engaging in that dance. There's something very human about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Somehow when you meet, God's really in the house.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and it can be very bordering on the seductive, no, because it's not really predicated on what a winning person you are.
That's true.
Because, the lights go on and the whole thing dissolves, which takes about 19 seconds, right?
Yeah.
And it's done and it's over. And you can't inhabit that temporary victory. The ordinariness of your days is where your best stuff comes from. It doesn't come from the stage, right?
Right.
The stage is the blossom of the ordinariness of your life. That's the way it's supposed to work. Or otherwise, your life, the life you return to when you come off the road, is unbearable. And you become unbearable to the people around you too. Because you want everything to be a spectacle, no?
Yeah, you just made something make sense for me about the younger generation. They want the ordinary to be the blossom in their everyday life because of the social media, because of the likes, because of wanting to be seen, because of this need to the propensity for celebrity.
Yeah.
There's this false story being sold to them that like you're gonna be rich and famous and all you got to do is sell yourself.
Right.
Constantly.
Yeah. It's the old Kruger line from the 50s. You're nobody till somebody loves you.
Mm.
Yeah. Or likes you, maybe even better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Nights of Grief and Mystery.
Yes. Well named.
Very well named.
It is.
Something else that's also well named is this new book, The Reckoning. Reckoning.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, apologies. Reckoning.
Yeah.
And I know you are one who loves the etymology of things, and reckoning by my account is to recount, to recall, or to calculate. What is reckoning in this sense?
Well, I tell you, I'm glad you asked, because
Here
there
it
is
is.
right there.
Oh, right on the inside cover.
Here's what it says. Reckoning even tells you how to pronounce it, right? As they do in the etymological dictionaries. : a bill or an account or its settlement. Yeah. Doesn't mean it puts everything to right. It means it puts everything on the table. Well, not everything, you understand, but what the catchment area that you've decided, you must address, and then you're best not to blink, or then don't call it reckoning. Call it persuasion, call it pitching, call it, the better world our hearts know is possible. You can call it those other things if that's what you did. But that's not what we did.
That's not what you did, because when you put a title like that out there, Reckoning, this is on par with Revelations, my brother.
Well, I know it. It sounds a little born again, doesn't it?
It does. It really does.
I know. Well, the first thing is, I saw it's the first time I've done something in print with somebody else.
Yeah. At this time, I just want to say Reckoning was co-authored by Stephen and by Kimberly Johnson. Correct.
Yeah, and it was basically at her initiative. And what happened was, I got this plea, basically, which wasn't entirely personal, not personally directed, nor personal in its origin. But she had a range of concerns which were becoming unraveled, if you will, over the course of the pandemic, both personal and in terms of her work and so on. Somebody told her she should be in touch with me. She asked me if she could be in touch with me with people listening in. Basically, that's what it was. Okay, it's a bit of a high wire act, but all right. I mean, if you're assured. And she wept through the whole thing, man. But here's the thing. She was so good at weeping that I didn't really, it wasn't that I didn't notice, it's that I wasn't thrown off. I wasn't concerned that something terrible was happening. And that's what her weeping was a sign of. I took it as a sign that something was happening, that she had, to some degree or other, had calculated for, and we proceeded, And ultimately what it is, I think, is a kind of engagement between a younger woman, no longer young, and an older man, not yet old. And so there's a lot of generational agitation available, and a real manifestation of, the fundament of difference and the plaintive consequence of not enough difference between the generations. Very, very manifest. And this is why I could get behind it as a book. I mean, it's one thing to do things that are somewhat more ephemeral, like as you and I are doing now, where it comes and it has its moment and it tends to go because it's not new anymore. You know what I'm saying? All that stuff. But there's something about this that that was testimony enough that it seemed to warrant occupying a temporary place, a kind of allegation of that it's taken something seriously. And because it did, maybe there's something in there that deserves the same kind of treatment. Yeah.
I know you don't like the word, but in a way, this is an offering of mentorship, because the book does oscillate from Kimberly to yourself in form of conversation and letters, and that that reads in a way where even from what I've seen, it's like, oh, cool, I can glean from this because I can understand the perspective Kimberly has, being of my generation, and the questions that she has coming through and out of COVID, and everything that brings for us all on individual levels, and what it's done to us on the collective stage. So thanks for leaning into that.
Well, I was leaned into too, so I was as much on the receiving end of whatever I come up with as I was on the delivering end. This is one of the moments where there's no official declaration that this is a kind of mentoring moment, and I'm not sure that all of the things necessary can appear if you designate it as a mentoring moment. It's a bit of a narrow causeway, to my mind it is. So it didn't start out that way. It's one of the things it became, but I think both of us were a bit edgy. Mostly it was this, and I have to give Kimberly a lot of credit right now for the following. In her world, which she flat out calls the white wellness world, right? That's where she works and lives and finds herself and so on. It's something I don't know much about, but I've heard of it, and I didn't fall over myself. Not only that, I made no effort. Not only that, I couldn't have cared less if anything I had to say or do had any pitch power to that world.
Yes.
Honest to God. I mean, I'm not chest pounding to say it. I'm just saying, it's just not, there's only so much life left in this body, and it's not going there. Translation, I wasn't concerned to make myself instantly accessible and amenable to people of her age. And that, I submit to you, is mentorship.
Beautiful. You also said, let's do it now while the tears are still memorable.
Right.
That's the urgency. That's the urgency, right?
That's right. Yeah. That was, like I said, she wept through the whole first one. And then at the end of the day, because we did it in the middle of the afternoon, I think. And at the end of the day, she wrote Natalie a thank you for setting it up, and then happened to mention that she was basically disintegrating in some fundamental, not complete way, but fundamental way, in real time.
Yeah.
And so Natalie brought this to my attention, which in this small house is not hard to do. And so it's over to you, And so I wrote to Kimberly which is the first time I'd ever written to her. And I said, look, this is, as I understand it, this is the outcome. This is the fallout for you right now. Okay. So here's what we do. We go back on the horse. We go back to the trough. We climb the mountain again. Okay. This time, your upheaving is the reason why. This time. You do that? Yeah, I do that. But we got to do it now, like tomorrow night, because you don't want to accommodate yourself to this, where, as I put it in the thing, being okay moves into the spare room down the hall. You have no obligation to be okay in a troubled time. God knows. Yeah. So yeah, a little sense of urgency and a little sense of the self-appointed about it. Because nobody else was in on this, but she subsequently told me that in her world, these are the most listened to things that she's ever done. Yeah. And I guess they get a lot of revisits and whatever it is. So, I mean, I don't presume to know why. And I don't think necessarily that's a mark of anything, that's worth marking. But it pleased her, and it gave her a sense that she was onto something there in the midst of her personal sorrows. And man, who wouldn't want that in a time of personal sorrow? That you don't feel entirely set off from your fellows as a consequence of what's befallen you. Yeah.
Did you feel a sense of holding space? When I hear you describe that, we're doing the men's work, we're doing masculine alchemy. And what you just described is a very masculine way to hold the space for that disintegration that was occurring.
Well, I've often been accused of being masculine, as if I have alternatives available to me. This is it, man. This is this particular package. That's the repertoire. There's nothing to apologize for. I'm not Noam Chomsky, man. I don't have to stretch across the whole waterfront, you know what I mean? And instantly become accessible to anybody that doesn't look, sound, feel, or manifest themselves like this. I mean, that's not what the world is, right? Surely the world is made up of everything that's not you, and then a little bit of you there tucked in. That's what it is. So I just come off my school. You can probably tell I'm a little tuned up for speaking. So we just finished Sunday. And I ended with a rumination about gratitude. And so for what it's worth, because I'm grateful for you calling and imagining that this is, worth your trouble and your time. But I like to make a distinction between being thankful and being grateful. Just an arbitrary distinction. But I think it might be useful. And it goes like this. So we got some training, if you got any kind of upbringing at all, probably in being thankful. And it ran like this. Say thank you. Okay. Why? What's that for? Well, because the nice person gave you this nice thing. And so you start to learn that thanks and thanksgiving is tied entirely to the receiving end of upside. See, that's how it works. So before you know it, and your parents are glad when it happens, being thankful becomes a reflex, not an action. It's a reaction instead. And it kind of happens before you invest yourself in it too deeply. And then you get kind of automatic formula of this kind of stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a place for it. Of course, there's a place for it. But I'm thinking about gratitude here, and I don't think I can find it in that scenario. Here's why. Because surely to God, most of a human's life is taken up by stuff that's not upside. Let's just say it that way, right? And it looks like it's supposed to be that way, since it so clearly is that way. Not just now. I suspect it's always been so, that most of human life, not that human. A lot of work to undertake just to break even, on being exposed to everything that's not you. Okay. So if most of your life doesn't fit into the category of upside, what happens to your capacity to be thankful? The answer is it withers on the vine, doesn't it? It's like a stalk of corn in a drought. It's just waiting for more upside. And it's like it's an upside crackhead. That's what it turns into. It's a dark thought to think, but it's there. So I'm reserving the word gratitude for this. You cotton onto this understanding that the world's bigger than what's working out for you. And you must realize then to be a grown-up for real. Surely it includes the capacity to be grateful for things that benefit you in no way, direct or indirect, but they're in the world. They have some kind of needfulness. And that's what your gratitude has to catch up to by saying amen to it first. That's the distinction I make. And gratitude is like you could say it's a grown-up understanding of thanks minus the payday.
Yeah.
So your capacity to be grateful becomes the payday for somebody on the receiving end, or some life form on the receiving end of your gratitude. Yeah. That's direct action right there.
I was going to say then it's also important that we bestow the gratitude not only through our words, but through our actions. So right here, I wanted to ask you, as at 3 years old, can you find gratitude for that look from your mother?
Well, it's mixed up, There's things that claim me. My concern for her retroactively is there. So I could go through the motions of agreeing with your formulation and say, of course I'm grateful, it made me the person I am, etc., and so on. That's not wrong. It's just not much of an answer, Yeah. It's a Hollywood answer, isn't it? I'm grateful for the Academy and so on. Yeah. In this case, your gratitude, my understanding of it is it's a dappled thing. It's not a single valence, it's a troubling, great gratitude is a troubling thing, because it pulls you in the direction of obligation and the capacity for some kind of redemptive act. At the same time, you're not feeling totally amen about the whole thing. You have a mixed take on the whole business. And so you find that gratitude even accommodates your ambivalence. See, it's not another, one and only true God. Gratitude isn't. It's a very tolerant operation, as it turns out. So yeah, I don't have much thanks for that moment. I'm glad I'm alive. I wish I had smartened up to the extent that I could have done while my mother is still around to reflect this stuff back to her. So what do you call that? I call it regret.
Regret, yeah.
But the regret is informed by the gratitude I was lucky enough to come to, which from the point of view of letting her in on it is too late. See, so can you be grateful for the too lateness of some things? See, that's grown up.
Yeah, thank you. As we are approaching the end of summer, into this transition into autumn, what do you find yourself being grateful for? What do you feel grateful for in this season?
Yeah, it's not my season of gratitude, unfortunately. I got a congenital thing about the dying off of a world around me, which in my part of the world, 4 seasons, very emphatic event, I've just begun to see the very first signs in the last 3 or 4 days. And I get melancholy about it. So I got to work on the gratitude aspect, because the melancholy comes first. And the melancholy, it's not depression or despair. It's just I am 1 year closer to know more of this.
Yeah.
That's in there now in a way it wasn't when I was your age at all.
Right.
This was an idea when I was your age. Now all my ideas sit alongside it at this age, and I wonder as my 2022 starts to close down a little bit, I wonder, am I going to get out of the 2020s?
Right.
Really, genuinely,
Yeah.
And sometimes I wake up and I think, am I in my 50s? And I lost track. So it's important to look your age. Otherwise you get very confused. And the last thing you want is to be confused about where in the arc of your life you are. Even if you don't approve of being there, it's better that you know it, because you don't want to be ambushed. No, you definitely don't want to be ambushed, because the younger people are watching you on the way out, and you're going to leave more than just what you intend to leave behind you by how you do that. And if I didn't learn that in the death trade, don't listen to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. On a personal note, you've inspired my wife. She's now on a course to become a death doula. One of her homework assignments was to read Die Wise, and the person who's facilitating this death doula training, required reading Stephen Jenkinson. So thank you, for providing that education in the ways that you have. What would you say to someone who's embarking in this trade? Because as you mentioned with Kimberly and kind of the white wellness, I think there's also a shift happening now into reality and into death work, into birth work, into doula work, into these more human interactive ways of being. And so what kind of advice, or what would you say to a young person who has the calling to that nature of work?
The first order of business is very likely you're going to transact this work in a kind of administrative and legal framework, corporate, or very likely. If you intend to get close to dying people, you're probably going to have to come through some kind of healthcare system to do it. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because there's no healthcare system that I've ever found yet that's predicated on the understanding that the tenderness of your heart at the beginning leads you to imagine is welcome and employed by that system. It's going to sound cynical. It's not cynical. I'm just saying, Give yourself 5 years. I saw, man, the training is longer than that. I hear you. I know. I was there. Okay. I'm not bullshitting you here. I'm saying, if you're really asking me for real, I would say do it in 3 or 4 year increments. Don't ask of yourself any more than that. It's not a failure not to be able to look the other way on the most heartbreaking shit. It's not a failure. Okay. There's a statute of limitations on how many shit sandwiches you can eat on the job. Really. And that job in particular, if you lead from the point of view of things that are represented in stuff like DIY or wherever else it come from, and it doesn't buy the medical model of human suffering and all the rest, and tries to tolerate it, tries to work with it, but not really invested in it, you must understand that your time in the trade is time limited. It just is, because the system is not going to imagine that your little personal revolution is necessary or welcome or belongs in any way, right? So eventually, the chances of you being on the outside looking in are more likely than not. So 2 things. One is absolutely invest yourself entirely. This is not a recipe for half doing stuff. Yeah, entirely, but not eternally. That's 1. And 2, nothing to wait for. Okay, it's not a recipe for being reckless. We're talking about other people's dying, not you. for now. So it's very much a service sector thing. But think this thought. Last time I checked, every culture worth a damn doesn't have much in the way of expertise. A lot of ability, but the way we mean expertise, like silos of expertise, exclusive concentrations of, we got this, Every culture that has that has got trouble. And we got it in spades. So when you make the care of dying people a kind of silo of expertise and kind of curated practice, one of the things that happens is the death wisdom that's supposed to be democratically accessible to the populace ceases to be and disappears down the manhole cover of the trade, you see.
Yeah.
And now what you're doing is you're engaging in a degree of guaranteeing job security, because so few people are good at it. So few people have got anywhere close to it, and they're just more than willing to let the pros take over. And that's not the time for professionalism, you see.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot, you're contending with a lot. I contended with a lot. It didn't last a long, long time. Are there people who can do it forever? Yeah, but I think there's costs to that. So maybe a great degree, a measure of success is that you were there for a brief, but rather intense and somewhat uncharted time. And you didn't lose your way, but you did lose the entry-level understanding of what was possible. You did lose that. Yeah. And you've got to lose that, because naivete has no place at the deathbed of a fellow human being.
Yeah. Have you given much thought to how you would like to, be buried, be taken care of in those ways? You want to go back to the earth? You want to go in the water?
Not really my call, It's, I don't think that, I'm not wiping my hands. I'm just saying, I know there's people around me that probably got some rather esoteric plans on the matter, most of which are highly illegal, probably.
Yes.
Some of them involve burning ships on the river in front of the house and things of that order. So,
oh man, do you have an archer with the arrow to shoot? That's a good look.
It's very possible. So, and they're probably going to sit me up and tie me to the mast and, dressed up really fine. I don't really know. And so, no, I don't really wrap myself around that material. I really understand that to be the responsibility of the living, but right now I'm living, right? So I have corollary responsibilities, but my own accoutrement at my demise, that's not really my business. I mean, I hope I look good, but honest to God, who looks real good? The days for looking good are kind of beyond you by then, but at least you could, if they dress you up in your cool stuff, you might get a pass wherever you go next. Who knows?
Rest in pieces for the living.
That's right.
Say. Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, let's, I'm going to bring us into a closing here. And with that, I just want to say thank you. I feel honored just to be able to have this time to have a nice conversation with you. And so appreciate your time.
Amen.
Is there anything that you feel called to share at this time with the brothers and sisters who are listening? Is there anything that's on your heart that feels like it wants to move through?
Well, I don't save stuff for the end of any encounter, right? So I really don't, Yeah. So there's no summing up to be done. But I would say at the risk of sounding a little self-serving, the band's going to Europe and then to Canada and the States all through this fall into the end of November. And, you've spent less consequential evenings. And we're coming to you as if the last 30 months have happened. Not in spite of them, not to get over them, but because of them. So if that sounds like a night out to you, join us, because you're right.
Yes. Nights of Grief and Mystery are back on the road, heading to Europe, Canada, and the United States. Your music's powerful and your voice is powerful. And I haven't experienced it live. I'm looking forward to that. But I'm excited to see what that show brings.
Me too.
Yeah. All right. Man, keep playing your music. Keep making your art, writing your books. Look at you. Look at you.
No. So far it's crazy days. Look, check this out. Had to dust off the stage gear. Look at it.
Hey,
there we go.
Look at this guy.
See, I'm not waiting till I'm dead. I'm going to try to look good now.
Yes. Sacred Sons, we had events in Scotland, in London, in Amsterdam. We're bringing our brand of masculine alchemy men's work also to Europe. And there's a sense of like going back to the old land and bringing some of the teachings from the new continent.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of that as you embark back to the old country?
Oh yeah. The last 3 gigs in Europe are in Ireland this time. And I mean, look at me. Look at me.
Yeah.
Where do you think this shit comes from? So
your kinfolk are ready for you.
Oh, I tell you, as a PS on the end of this thing, and then we'll say farewell. First time I was there, I mean, you're a crazy person if you propose to stand up somewhere in the midst of an Irish mob and talk to them in English. It's just crazy. It's a bad calculation because they're so good at it. It's like, what have you got kind of thing? Because they turned conversation into an art form, no?
Yeah.
So I got up there and I didn't really know that. So I was just stupid enough to be blessed. You know what I mean? And I just about to speak and I heard some old lady say something way in the back of the room, rather aggressively. But I couldn't hear what it was. So I stopped the proceedings. I hadn't said anything yet. And I said, beg your pardon, or what'd you say? She said, well, and sure you're Irish. Now, if this had happened in Canada, because we're fairly conservative people, everybody would have looked back at her and glared her down because she interrupted proceedings and drew attention to herself, which in this country is like a sin. So not one person did that. You know what they all did? They leaned forward in their chair and look at me to see if they can see what she's seeing. Okay, so this is all happening in a second, right? And so I say to her, what makes you say that? Well, she said, look at your head. It wasn't even what I looked like. It was literally the shape of my melon.
Look at your head.
Look at your head, she said. And when she said that, all the older Irish people in the room looked at each other and went, yeah, go on then. We figured you out. Go on. And when I came at lunchtime, back from lunch, here on the desk where I'd been working from, there was a gift of a Aran knit sweater, beautiful tweedy thing that somebody'd gone out at lunchtime and bought for me. And then a card that more or less everybody had signed. And over top of all their signatures, this is what they'd written. And if this shit doesn't break your heart, you got to check yourself for a pulse, right? It said, well, it seems that your old ones have gone and brought you home. They said, that will do. That will do. And it did. And it still does. And I'm going back to say, how are you, Mom? How are you, Gramps? This is what I made of myself. I hope it'll pass. Yeah. Well, listen, man, we'll see you on the road. Yeah, San Diego, right?
San Diego.
Yeah.
We'll be locking those dates in and taking care of you as you come to California. Get a bit better weather. You play for some of these young hippies. We're ready for you.
Okay, deal. And Steven, thanks for this.
Yeah, thank you. You're a great lad. You're a great lad, Stephen, and blessings on this tour, on this journey, and on the book Reckoning, which is out now. We will be promoting it, to our community and
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the offering.
All right.
With that, Stephen Jenkinson, Reckoning, Nights of Grief and Mystery, Adam Jackson, Sacred Sons. We're out, family. Peace.
Adios.